We're in the early days of 2021, so it's still Happy New Year to everyone watching. I'm Linda Akibi, and you're welcome to the Gavel. We're continuing from where we stopped last week, where we looked at some of the memorable events in the National Assembly in 2020. In the previous edition, we went down memory lane to look at the National Assembly's investigation of financial recklessness in the Niger Delta Development Commission, which unearthed a can of worms and was truly dramatic. We also looked at the storm which followed the Public Works Program, the disagreements between ministers and federal lawmakers, as well as how Parliament addressed the security challenges in the country. Today, we'll be wrapping up the year-end reports with a look at the controversial Infectious Diseases Bill sponsored by the Speaker of the House of Representatives after the advent of COVID-19. 2020 was indeed a rocky year for the world as countries were confronted with the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the ways the National Assembly thought to manage the pandemic was enacting the Control of Infectious Diseases Bill. The proposed legislation was intended to replace the Quarantine Act and strengthen the management of public health and further contain the coronavirus pandemic in the country. However, the bill provoked controversy in the country, with some human rights advocates describing it as draconian and warned that if passed, it could further stifle human rights freedom in Nigeria. During the public hearing, the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control agreed with those who have said that the bill gives too much powers to his organization. He argued that states should be allowed to handle health emergencies themselves.
And the emphasis on the use of force to achieve the objectives may exacerbate these existing challenges, generate public resistance, and undermine the efforts of NCDC and other competent authorities to manage outbreaks of infectious disease. Finally, NCDC also thinks that the bill, as drafted, gives excessive powers to the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. These powers need to be carefully evaluated for the future of our country.
Even the Minister of Health was not entirely on board with the bill.
The prayer of the Federal Ministry of Health that this memorandum will be useful to assist the committee in considering amendments of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention Act of 2018, an amendment of the Quarantine Act of 1926 in place of this infectious disease bill of 2020. This is the position of the entire Federal Ministry of Health.
The challenges of the moment.
State governors who also attended the hearing asked the House of Representatives to review the bill and allow them handle future health emergencies in their states. They say the proposed bill robs state governors of powers to declare health emergencies or make health regulations to curtail the further spread of diseases, and these powers are now being handed over to the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control.
This act and the bill, both the Act, the Quarantine Act, and even now the bill, gives governors and states very scant operational space to maneuver. And even the limited space that was given in the Quarantine Act is being taken away by this bill that we're currently considering. We think, at the level of governors, that this bill appears to vest overbearing discretionary powers on the Director General of the Nigerian Center for Disease Control. Anyone who has read it will know what I'm talking about. And that is without prejudice, as I said, to the role that the NCDC plays and the hard work of the current leadership. But we all know, as Democrats, that it is always dangerous to vest uncontrollable powers on any one person.
Months after the public hearing, no mention of the bill has been made either in the House of Representatives or the Senate. However, Senator Chukwuka Utazi on May 5, 2020, introduced a similar bill tagged National Health Emergency Bill 2020.
Well, you see, what I have is the law I have here. I haven't read what's in the House of Reps, but what I've just known is that we have a bill that is going to address the health issues connected with COVID and beyond, so that such issue, whenever it comes in the future, you have a law.
Does the bill make vaccination compulsory?
No, it doesn't make vaccination compulsory. There's nothing. Because we have yellow fever in this country here. It's not compulsory. If you want to travel any part of the country outside the world, if you are coming from an area that have such issue, all the airports in anywhere you are going, the port of destination will demand to know whether you are vaccinated for yellow fever. You know, if you are in any part of the world. So we have always had yellow fever vaccination here. If you want to travel, they demand for it. At the airport, you go with it. If you don't have it and you get to the airport, they will ask you to do it there, you know, before you go, so that you don't bring it. If they're having fear that where you are going, we reject it, they will enforce it here. So this is the issue we are having here. There's nothing new we are trying to bring up that doesn't exist.
We had an interview with the Associate Professor of Law, Bayes University, Dr. Sam Amadi, to discuss the year 2020 in the National Assembly and how Parliament responded to some major issues which shaped the year.
I think first we have to agree that this has been a very difficult year for everybody globally. And across the world, we saw legislatures live up to expectation. Even in the US right now, we are still seeing great deal of work trying to create consensus around the level of stimulus. But in Nigeria, if you look back, apart from the central bank, the economic team, the vice president office that has come up with some palliatives in terms of stimulus plan and all that, the National Assembly has not played any key role. And in fact, interestingly, they spent the bulk of that period on vacation. We understand the fact around COVID protocols, so many of the assemblies would probably go online, and we saw that the government worked mostly through online platforms. But of course, we didn't see National Assembly go online. We saw them basically go AWOL. They were out of business. Again, in the few times that they conveyed during that period, they probably conveyed to pass, approve appointments and do some basic things. But we didn't see much deliberation around what would be the response of government to economic challenges of the COVID pandemic. And I think in terms of also the MBS monthly report on economic impact of COVID. So you saw issues around income, unemployment, and so on and so forth. We didn't hear anything from National Assembly in terms of those deliberations. So what expected minimum was, look, consultations, deliberations, members bringing up motion, and thorough research around the impact of the COVID. We're talking about, within the same period, the Nigerian economic collapse in terms of oil revenue. We saw oil even get to minus one in terms of oil pricing, and that had significant impact on revenue, impact on distributable income to states. Again, we didn't see National Assembly focus on what this means for the purpose of economic development and what this means going forward for Nigeria. So one can argue that clearly they were not responsive to the COVID challenges. We can also say that they did not create, we didn't see them issue any reports or any kind of resolutions that had quality, that could help the executive in managing the economic and social challenges of the COVID. The idea of a legislature is not just about controlling check and balance. The idea of a legislature is also to provide alternative insights, alternative ideas, alternative policy materials to help government, executive manage conditions. So we would expect something like, for example, a National Assembly coming out with some narrative around how to deal with revenue shortfall, narrative around cost of governance. This is how they could guide government. In fact, ask some government officials to submit proposals and show how they are managing with revenue, and so they can be able to now provide for themselves intelligence in the next 2021 budget. So basically, you can conclude that, look, they have meant well. They were in their constituencies distributing palliatives. Maybe some of them were sending Indomie and other things to their constituents. But primarily, they didn't show any rigor or commitment to legislative business to support executive action on the COVID management.
Now, for some time now, the National Assembly has been debating issues of insecurity in the country. Barely a week goes by without, seeing the Senate or the House of Representatives talk about insecurity in the country. Do you think the National Assembly has done all it can do in addressing the issue of insecurity in the country?
Well, I think the National Assembly is maybe probably being careful. First, the nomenclature, the profile of the leadership of the National Assembly is one that we should expect what we are getting, meaning that they came in on the pretext that the previous leadership were opposed to the president. The notion, once the 2019 election happened, the theme out there was, we want a National Assembly that will work with the executive, that work with Mr. President. And don't forget that the previous National Assembly leadership were also the same party until late. So the fact that they were the same party and they were seen as enemies of the president, and so some people in the party attributed the poor performance of the executive branch of government to what they call hostile leadership of the National Assembly. So they won. The idea here was that this is going to be a National Assembly that, so to say, in bed with the executive, and that has affected their response to everything. Now, if you look at the security challenge, it's obvious that the president is at least absentee totally. He has been absent, he's not addressing the issue, he's not addressing the people. We've seen several meetings, pictures of meeting with service chiefs, and we've seen, we've heard assurances, endless, about we're in charge and things are getting worse. So what is part of the National Assembly that really cares and independent at all, is that beyond all these occasional requests to sack the service chiefs, which I'm sure Villa does not even care about a bit about what they say, they've not done anything. Now, if you look at their public hearing, even some of the executive session with the service chiefs, it's more like, we don't want to embarrass you, just tell us it's okay, and then you go. So National Assembly has really done nothing in terms of auditing. That's their job. We talk about oversight now. Oversight is not calling up newspapers to come and tell us why you scandalize us, or some CEOs, very low level, who can do nothing. You just embarrass them. Oversight is simple. Audit the war against terror. And now what does that mean? That means that you can't do that by simply calling the service chief to come and tell you what they do. No. You have to set up an independent think tank, if you like, to investigate, to bring out reports. So what that means is, for example, we've had cases about people saying fifth columnist. We've had cases about corruption, about even international reports saying that some of the leaders of this war against terror are basically themselves fueling it, because it's real. This is a real economy. This is what we call military business complex. This is money. This every day this terrorism or insecurity continues, some persons are becoming richer and richer. This calls for investigation. You don't do that by 2 minutes sweet talk, and then you shut down, and then you announce media, and then you travel to your constituency. So bottom line is that the National Assembly has not inquired. Every war is an economy. It's a dark economy. It's like a black market. The citizens are going to die because complexity all the way. This is where a strong National Assembly would have inquired into the manner of this war. We've seen, for example, even brigadier top military officers serving who have challenged their leadership for lack of effective leadership. Somebody has just been convicted of martial trial, a military trial, for saying that the war, for criticizing the leadership in the war front, a soldier. Now, all this tells you that there's something that may not be going well in the war against terror. For the past 7-8 years of this intense fight against Boko Haram, we've not seen any parliamentary report saying this is what we found out. This is what we think is the problem. Even the chairman of committees on Air Force, Army, Defense, and all that, national security, they produce nothing what bankable intelligence reports.
So you're not satisfied with the reports from the Security Summit in the 8th Assembly and the one in the 9th Assembly?
That's not what they do. It's very funny that National Assembly continues to hold conferences. That's not the work of, like I said, they're an NGO. So they say the Summit of Security, they invite paper presenters. The chairman, the Senate President, or whoever comes and deliver and give open keynotes. That's not their job. That's not their job.
You're welcome back to the Gavel. We'll continue with the interview with Dr. Sam Amadi on the response of a National Assembly to major issues in 2020.
Well, when last did you hear about British Parliament organize a conference, summit? When did you hear of Congress or Senate in the US? They don't do conference. What they do is investigation. That's not a conference. So when we talk about this summit, security summit, everybody come and judge your experts present papers. That's not what you are doing. They should be invited to speak on this platform. It should be their own. So it's another of those rackets we do. We create a bureaucracy around National Assembly. Okay, well, National Assembly does conference. You have an NGO self. They run NGO. They behave as if they are like another corporate entity. That's what their job is. Legislative. 2 things: investigation, make laws. Investigate, make laws. Audit those laws that are operating. Change the laws. So if you're doing a national security summit, that is Georgia, bring experts. Sam Amade will do a paper and I'm paid 500,000. Other people, but that's not what your work is. The job is that you will set up, even hire private. When they set up congressional commission, they look for experts, maybe retired generals, and then put them together and say, this is a binational commission to inquire into the war against terrorism, to find out, 1, how this was conducted, 2, why are we not winning, 3, why is Boko Haram still carrying out massive onslaught against Nigerian soldiers, 4, what's the state of morale of our combatants, 5, look at the machinery, equipment, are we properly equipped? Have we done what to do? Is there anybody whose failure is enough for this failure and what should be done? And these experts go to work, take like 3 months, 2 months, whatever time, and produce a report. That report gives you data, mentions name, tells what is wrong. Based on this data, you will now start engaging the executive, and then you can now create a new agency. You can now change the nomenclature of the military formation in Nigeria. You can now amend the Armed Forces Act. You can do a lot of things. That is what legislative work is. And this kind of work calls for a certain level of intelligence, certain level of focus. It's not a work just to fly by night, just do a press conference. And worse, it's not a work where you do conference. What's conference? That's the job. Every time they're organizing summit with one NGO and the National Assembly, I was one of them. That's not the job of National Assembly. A National Assembly member can come and speak on that day. That's not their work to do summits. It's left for civil society group, universities, worst case for ministries and executive branch of government that's trying to harvest perspective. Your job is to read report from experts, read report from the executive, read commission investigative work on what parastatals are doing, MDS are doing. From that, tease out your issues you have with them and conduct a hearing where you spend 10 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, drilling, confronting public officers who have mandate to achieve strategic public good and asking them, why, General, on so and so, there was an attack at Burma. The report says that the communities have given intelligence that they are about to be attacked 2 days before the attack. Why did the military not intervene?
Now, this notion of, in this 9th Assembly, of working with the president, of having a harmonious relationship with the executive, would you say the country has been better for it?
Harmony means that you provide the executive with all legislative framework to achieve their mandate. You don't just go and tackle them, block them. For example, the president has a prerogative to choose his executives, his cabinet, his MDA's leader. It's his responsibility if he fails, he fails. If I was a Senate president, I would not block unnecessarily the president power. It's the president power, make a choice. Instead, the president brings somebody contravene for example, if the president now, the act says that all agencies must have one from each zone to maintain balance, and the president flouts that act, and then brings somebody, and they miss out southwest, or southeast, or north central, or northeast. A good parliament will block and refuse and take it back to Mr. President. Mr. President, these nominations violate the act. So the idea of saying we want to work harmoniously with the presidency is a good one. But the question is, what is your responsibility as a parliament? You have to make good laws. You have to provide them with good legislative framework. You have to quickly approve what they need to work. But at the same time, you need to correct constitutional or legal violations by the executive. Secondly, you need to present to executives a different perspective of what people feel, of issues. So for example, under these NSAS, we know that the Constitution allows Nigerians to protest. So assuming the executive is saying no protest, the National Assembly should say no protest is a fundamental right. So my notion of co-management and interdependency is that A responsible, mature National Assembly does not set out to block, tackle, or truncate the executive branch of government. It sets out to complement, at the same time, to protect the common good. And when the executive becomes ruinous of constitutional due process, to block it in the name of the people, not because I don't like Mr. President, not because I want to be president, and not because I want to impeach him. It's because we need to protect the Constitution and protect the integrity of governance and protect economic and social well-being of the people.
We're still examining how the National Assembly responded to some major issues which shaped 2020. And this time, we sat down with Idayat Hassan from the Center for Democracy and Development to discuss this.
When you are talking about the National Assembly, you are putting together both the House of Representatives and the Senate, and they've worked different ways in the last 12 months, really. So they would get average on that, and there are reasons you will actually think in terms of that. When you look at the COVID-19 itself, immediately in January, there was a response calling on the government and the Ministry of Health and its institutions to immediately start policing the borders and doing the needful as it relates to COVID-19, even before we had any official case now, recorded. It was in also the same vein that you even had the Senate talk in terms of the increase allocation for the NCDC so that they would actually be able to address this. On economy, I think that is where they were quite proactive, the House of Representatives, without any prompting, without the executive bringing it up. They had actually introduced a bill on the economic stimulus. I think this is like foresight. If the same had actually been matched by the Senate, and even if it had come possibly first as an executive bill, you can just imagine how timely it would actually have been addressed. But one of the real challenge for the COVID-19 response is the shutdown of the National Assembly itself, especially during a period where they should not have shut down. Like, it's a period where every parliament was trying to work across Africa. Now we should look at the African experience. It's not necessary for us to always look at the developed countries. In different parts of Africa, you find people actually resorting to maybe social distancing, just having a quorum to sit. Some were even making use of Zoom platform, Cisco platform, e-parliament, different form of e-parliament. By e-parliament, it doesn't mean that everything should be and absolute. But having few people in parliament and others joining by Zoom, having virtual public hearing, these were different strategies other parliaments used. Now, their inability to do that affected Nigerian citizens in the sense of the human rights violation, in the ability to provide oversight on some of the fiscal spending of the government itself, to respond to human rights abuses, to do several things that actually should have been done during that period. But again, each time we are actually evaluating, we should look at the positives again, and I'll use the House of Representatives as a positive.
What would you like to see for the National Assembly in 2021?
I think that in 2021, first, the National Assembly probity will be the first thing, and openness. For a long time, Nigerians have called for a openness, like they really want to know the nitty-gritty of the budget of the National Assembly, how much the lawmakers earn. Now, this is not being taken in the good faith that it requires.
And this is where we call it a day on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us, and see you again next week.